Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Sarah Keele, the illustrator behind the Dark City series of board games by Facade Games, as well as a Queen Bee game from Elixir Games. Her broader work also includes publications like The Friend magazine and various book covers. Sarah, welcome to the Binge. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing really well. It's good to be here.
Well, I tell you, your name has come up several times on the Binge so far. We've only been going for, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks or so. But you know what? When someone's name keeps kind of popping up at that point, it's you got to get them on the podcast and talk to them and find out what all is going on. So you come very highly regarded, obviously from Travis from Facade Games, as well as our friend Mike Bruner from Queen Bee. So
thank you guys.
I know, and I know they're probably gonna be watching any second now. We'll watch them.
Yeah.
Sometimes chime in with some questions as we go. So, so take me a little bit through. This is a little bit unique for us, having instead of a developer, actually having somebody that's provided art. And I think it's pretty cool to talk to an artist. And I think it's important to differentiate between illustrator, creative designer. So can you just kind of describe the different skills? Because sometimes people think one person does both, and sometimes people do, but they're two different things. So let's talk a little bit about that.
They are two totally different things, and yet they overlap a ton. And there are people who can do both. And the way people use the wording is interchangeable a lot of the times, and that just kind of adds to that confusion. But yeah, you have illustrators and graphic designers, you have layout artists, typography people, people who just do fonts and that's all they do. That's its own beast. And then you've got your 3D artists and and then on top of that, board game designers are also called designers, and it's like, wait, what design thing am I talking about here?
Oh, the terminology is all over the place. So how would you best describe what you do? What is your kind of skill set? Is it one of these things? Is it a combination?
I would say mine is specifically illustration. That's what I would identify it as, I guess. And that's definitely more image oriented, or like, I don't know, illustrative, where you're trying to communicate a visual idea, but it's telling a story, not just a concept. But at the same time, sometimes it can be more conceptual. Whereas graphic design, you get more logo type things. You get, you can dabble more into the layout side of things, and graphic designers can be more familiar with fonts than illustrators might be. So yeah, I don't know if that's...
So if someone's designing a board game, someone like yourself would help with the theme, the story, the characters, kind of all the artwork, for lack of a better word. And then they would probably then go to a graphic designer who would then work on the layout, on getting that actually on the box or on the card. Any kind of overlays, maybe if there needs to be some text or things talking about what that picture is or that story is, they'd be the ones that kind of take it from there, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So illustrator would be kind of, I'm going to tell the story and I'm going to give the mood. And graphic designer is, I'm going to communicate how, like, and make it easier for players to read what they're supposed to do, and how, like, it just...
they organize the information, maybe.
Yeah.
There we are. So how long have you been doing this for? Like, have you been doing artwork since, or illustrating since you're a kid, or kind of when did this become a serious thing for you?
Yeah, since I was a kid, childhood, wanted to be a dolphin trainer. Grew up, probably about 5th grade, I had a teacher that was like, hey, you're kind of good at this. And that was like, okay, I guess I'm going to be an artist. Because even when I was in my dolphin trainer phase, I was drawing myself with dolphins. So I was still drawing.
There's a game in there somewhere, I think.
Yeah, the game thing, that part just found me. I was not planning on being a board game artist. That wasn't something that I was dreaming about or thought, like, I just didn't even know that was a thing I could do. So
now when you do your artwork, and I would agree with that, because I walked through the Fan Expo a year ago here in Toronto, and I was trying to find some artists at the time for a game I was working on. And I said, there's literally aisles upon aisles of people doing comic books and different types of, very themed artwork around magical creatures and so forth. I thought, gosh, I'm going to get some business cards. I'm going to see if I can get some contacts here. And it was amazing to me how many tables I stopped by where I said, have you done any illustration on a game, or have you thought about doing a board game? And almost every one of them said no. But that's interesting. I actually, thinking about that, that could be something kind of fun to work on. So that's pretty cool. And now with your style, are you physically painting on a canvas or something like that? I can see some stuff behind you. It's tough to tell if it's actually canvas or not, but
this is, oh, I'm going to have to lose my headphones if I'm going to reach it.
That's okay.
I should have put it closer, but they're acrylic paintings, and they're on little wood masonite board about that thick.
Okay.
This one has 24 karat gold leaf on it. Wow. And then it's also, so it's not just acrylic, there's also charcoal that's black and white charcoal kind of mixed in. So it's like just kind of a bunch of mixed media stuff going on in there.
And then from there, do you scan it? Like, how do you digitize it? How do you get it over to then someone who's going to use it and manipulate it and work with it onto their medium?
Mm-hmm. So you can scan it in, or you can photograph it. My brother-in-law is a professional photographer. So I just kind of brought all of my stuff over to him and was like, okay, Richard, take pictures. So he did. And so those are the ones that you're seeing on the campaign. Some of those, there's a few of them where I need to get rephotographed because I painted on them after the fact.
Sure.
So aside from those, all of the ones that you see, we had to make sure the lighting was right because they're very textured. And some of them were glossy. So you have to make sure not to have too much shining back in the camera.
And then with the things like gold leafing and so forth, that sounds, I don't want to use the word tedious, because if you enjoy it, it's not necessarily tedious. It sounds like a lot of work. Like, how long does it take to do something like that? So that, like, for instance, the one behind you, for the people listening that aren't watching, it's probably 8 by 10, maybe larger.
I think it's 16 by 20.
Okay.
16 by 20. Yeah.
So how long would that take, something like that?
I think this one took me, sometimes paintings can take me like anywhere between 10 to like 40 hours. Wow. So I can't remember how long it took me because I didn't really keep track of my time, but it was about a 2 to 3 week period of working on it off and on.
So I'm just sharing for the people, again, watching, and the people hearing can't see, but if you want to see this, I encourage you to go to sarahkeeleart.weebly.com, and you can see some of the artwork that Sarah's done. It is, I mean, the amount of detail it's quite significant. Like, there's a huge amount of detail in these images. And when I look at the Dark series, which I believe had a lot of images. Like, how many images did you do for let's even take Bristol 1350, which I will say hit over $1 million US dollars. So in Canada, it's like $1.3 million. Huge campaign. Congratulations being part of that. How many images did you have to do for that?
So there were 9 character cards and times 2, because we had the Kickstarter edition ones as well, or the Kickstarter exclusives. Excuse me. And there were 6 Remedy card illustrations. So 18 plus 6, whatever that is. Can't do math.
That's okay. 24. So, and then how many, so that 24 images, how long did that take you from start? So when they said, okay, we got this new game, here's how it kind of works, we need to do the theme. How long did it take from the moment they said, okay, go, to when you actually had the artwork ready to go to them?
So it kind of got broken up a little bit. the first 9 characters and the 6 remedy cards were done in 2019 between September and November. I can't remember exactly which months they were, but it was in that range. And then the last 9 characters were done so right before the campaign launched this year. So back in between March and April and May is kind of when I was working on those. And then even a little bit into that, I had to add another painting that I wasn't, the Bard painting ended up being a Kickstarter backer decided he wanted to be in the game. And so
cool.
He reached out to Travis and was like, I want to be in this game. Can you make me into this game? And he paid for it. And so I had to do one extra painting, and it actually replaced another painting that was supposed to be in the game. But I think for the better, because I think I like the Bard piece better.
Yeah, that's cool.
than the other one. So
and to be memorialized in a game like that, I'm sure that guy's just ecstatic.
Yeah, right? I hope he's happy with it. He gets to keep the original. So.
And did you do the board as well, or just the character artwork, or?
I just did the character artwork. I've done the board in the past. I did the Tortuga board. But this one they did themselves. And Holly is a graphic designer, and I think they hired on another graphic designer at some point for Bristol as well. So they had some help. Gotcha.
And the Tortuga, so people who are watching, again, if you go to facadegames.com, you can see some of the work that Sarah's done on these games. Again, it is very, very detailed. And these games have funded quite high. I would say some of the highest funded games I've seen. So as part of that process, how deep do you get into the process? So does a designer come to you and say, kind of, here's what I'm thinking I kind of want, and then it's up to you to come back and kind of put your spin on it? Or how collaborative is that? Like, how does that whole process work?
Yeah, so it kind of depends. Some people have a stronger opinion than others. Because I mean, I haven't, so Mike, for example, he had all of his art already done, and I had to kind of match that style. Versus Travis with Facade Games, they kind of are like, we trust you, do whatever you want. And I
that was on the last game. What about the first game?
Well, even the first game a little bit, I had some free reign with that. So I think that's just kind of Travis's personality is like, I mean, he obviously there's changes to make and stuff here and there, but it was never overbearing for me. So it was like, okay.
And how are those changes done? Do you do them on your end, or does the graphic designer kind of go in and post and make some adjustments, or how best does that work?
Ideally, I make the adjustments. That way I can have a little bit more control over that. Because if you get someone else, like a graphic designer, trying to paint over an illustration, if that's what you're referring to.
Maybe manipulate the images. So to give an example.
Manipulating images, yeah.
Yeah, so say there's on a card, and I've had this in the past with games I've worked on, where the image is great, but you kind of need that arm to be 15 degrees more to the downward, so I can fit in the text I want on there without it going over top of the arm. So in that case, you would have to repaint that arm, where a graphic artist could go in and digitally kind of move some things around without disrupting things too badly. So again, how does that work kind of in your process?
Yeah, that's a little tricky. I think with a situation like that, if you can have the graphic design, like kind of like the first few pieces that you do, you kind of do the graphic design and the illustration around the same time. Yeah. So when Holly and I have worked together in the past, I think we've had like some of the graphic design elements will kind of cover up the illustration. And so, but we learned through like the first piece, we just kind of do like a trial run or something. And then after that, once they have that first piece established, then they're able to do the graphic design over it. And then after that, I have to stick to that formula. Instead of doing the whole thing first and then realizing that the graphic design elements work on some pieces but not on others, and having problems that way. Because for me, I would feel obligated to fix that. I know some illustrators will want to charge more per little change that they have to do, but a lot of that can be avoided by just communicating those needs and anticipating those situations before they happen, which can be hard to anticipate when you don't have that experience.
Yep.
On both ends, it's also the illustrators don't always anticipate that if they're not familiar with doing board game art.
So there's two questions from the gallery. One is, and I'll do Carl's first. Is asking, do you send in sketches? So do you do kind of a very rough kind of, here's what I'm looking at doing, and send that to the game, I guess the game designers or the client, and then get the feedback, and then before you start kind of putting, paint to canvas, so to speak, or?
Yeah. So, I mean, with these, I had a lot of freedom. So I was able to, I did send in the sketches first, and I said, okay, here's the direction I'm going. And then I didn't really have to send any further images until they were pretty much done. And with traditional paintings, they're a lot harder to do changes, but they did have changes for me. And a lot of the changes I ended up doing were just digital, because it was going to be too much of a hassle to try to, like the Mason character, his color in the final game is green. I originally painted his shirt orange.
Yeah.
And they were like, we need him to be green. I'm like, okay, Photoshop.
And so you did it yourself? Did you do the changes on the end? Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And like when they're easy changes for me, like it's like 5 minutes, color overlay, done.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that, stuff like that. I also plan for those things to happen, and I price that in before. And then if it's a macro change or something bigger, and I have to go in and actually repaint something completely, and then I will need to charge extra for stuff like that. But
sure.
And it does happen.
So Mike is asking, he's watching in, he's lots of questions, Mike. Thanks. He's very interested. And of course you guys work together, but his thing he's saying, and it's a good point, is how have you changed your style now in working with clients, especially on the game side? Like, if you, obviously you're, as you said, a few moments ago, there's learning on, and there's experience required kind of on both sides. When you started, you didn't have the experience. So you've now obviously done a number of games. How have you positioned how have you kind of pivoted towards and leaned into some of that experience and adjusted your style accordingly?
So, I mean, you always keep those things in mind, little nuances of like, oh, you don't want your illustration to interfere with the graphic design or vice versa. So you keep that in mind beforehand and you try to plan for it. But just art style in general, I've actually been realizing that the more me I do, instead of trying to make other people happy, the more happy other people will end up being. Because sometimes you get people who just aren't, art articulate at verbalizing the visual needs that they need or whatever. And you have to kind of interpret that as an artist. And newer artists get so stressed out and overwhelmed by that stuff. Whereas if you kind of ignore it and then just do what's going to make you happy as an illustrator, chances are they're more likely to be happy with it themselves. Not always. And I'm still trying to figure out how to cope with that, but at least you do what they ask you to, as a client, to keep that relationship, of course, but I illustrate it and I put my love into it and I try to just make it the best piece that I can.
That's awesome. I find that the worst thing you can do to an illustrator is say, I just think I want it to be different. I think I want it just better somehow. I mean, you just such like this non-feedback, right? And it's impossible to get people to articulate what they want. People are good at telling you what they don't want, right? So they can say, if they can react, they can say, I don't like that. And this is, hopefully they can say, this is why I don't like that. But getting them to articulate what they want is got to be an immense challenge. Maybe one piece of advice for developers out there who are looking at hiring someone like yourself is maybe start off with the graphical template. So if you're doing a card, give that to the artist and say, here's a template. Here's the section where the text is going in. I'm kind of dummied it up. Maybe we'll throw a stock image in there for now to dummy it up. And then that gives you kind of what you got to paint around, right?
Yes. Amen.
So one thing I want to get into, and this is something I've encountered myself, is when you're trying to find an illustrator or say an artist, I call them artists, is how best do they approach kind of the tough question, right? Of, okay, what's this going to cost? And it's very uncomfortable, right? Because you don't want to insult someone, because art is very personal. As you just said, you're pouring literally love into this image, and you don't, on the client side, you don't want to insult the artist by saying, hey, I don't think you're, I don't want you to feel like you're not worth what you're worth. But how best do they broach that? I can't that's how uncomfortable it is. Like, how do you get them to broach that conversation with you? Or how best can they facilitate the conversation with you when they're trying to hire someone like yourself?
Well, so, I mean, I get inquiries all the time, and people are like, sometimes they're generic, and you can tell they've sent it out to like 5 different artists, and you don't know that it's necessarily you that they like, or they're just throwing out the fishing pole and waiting for someone to bite. There's a few different ways you can approach it. You can say, here's my budget. This is what I can afford. Can you do this for me? They can post it on like Facebook pages or forums, or where lots of people are seeing it, and you'll get people who want their foot in the door so bad they'll do anything. But if you have a specific artist you have in mind, I definitely recommend respecting their prices and not trying to haggle them in any way. But it's not, I think what makes it hard to ask is if you get a price that you're not expecting and it's above what you want, and you're like, hey, that's too much. Like I don't know. You don't want to insult, you would never would, right? But some people do.
So maybe, is it fair to say maybe the best way to handle that is to say, honestly, here's my budget. Here's how many pieces I'm looking to
say that again.
Sorry. Is it fair to say that some people are looking?
We're frozen.
Am I frozen?
No.
Refresh your screen. I'm live. I'm fine on this side.
Okay. There we go.
We're live. This is Facebook Live, folks. So I was just saying, maybe it would be fair for someone when they're trying to do a contract to say, be upfront and be honest, to say, this is actually my budget. This is how many pieces I'm looking for. Is this something you could do for me? Or what could you do for this budget? Might be the most respectful way to approach it, but that might then help avoid the haggle, right? Because you're being upfront. You're saying, this is how much money I have. And it may not work. You might say, well, I can't really do for that. And then that's fine. There's no kind of hard feelings. But I think that's a better approach than maybe saying, I need you to do this for this amount. Is a bit more insulting, right? Because
I can agree with that. And I mean, the other thing too is just ask, because I think it's fair for illustrators. Like for me, when I get an inquiry, hey, can I get a price estimate? Sure, I'm happy to give you an estimate. The only things that I would ask for in return to give you a more accurate estimate, are just what's your asset list that you need? How many components do you need, art or illustrative elements on it? What type of illustrative elements? Do you need a full illustration, or do you need like little spot illustrations? How many character pieces? Do you need splash art for promotional purposes, and or do you just need a game board or box art, or any of those things? I just need a list and their rough sizes, and it doesn't have to be exactly right. Just roughly, it's their playing card size cards, or their bigger size cards, or the game board is about 16 by 16 or something. Just stuff like that. And those things can change between that conversation in between, and then when you start the artwork. But once you start the artwork, it needs to be set in stone as much as possible. Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would say is, and I've run into this in the past, where people don't necessarily think ahead, that you really want to make sure you have very high resolution images that you're using.
Because yes, and you need to know the resolution. Yes.
Right? Because it might, if you say it's a 3.5 by 5 inch card, okay, but then I may want to use that image for a poster, and then as soon as you blow it up, it's going to be all pixelated. It's going to look like garbage, right? So, start off. You can always scale down. It's tougher to scale. Well, you can't scale up really, right? Without losing resolution. So,
nope.
So where do you go from here? So you've mentioned to me in the past when we've chatted that you've got some games you're working on your own. So something is more of a, so you're looking at seriously as a hobby, you're looking at a Kickstarter route. What is it kind of you're looking at?
Well, we're looking at freelance is great, but not as good as a steady job, but there are no steady jobs right now. So Facade just made almost, nearly $1 million. There's money in this industry. A little bit of motivation coming from that. But also my husband, he's been working in the video game industry for the last 10 years and had a lot of experience game designing gameplay over there. So I was like, well, let's just translate that to board games and see what happens. So we're working on a game. We're working on 2 games actually right now. We've got 2 of them that we're in play testing phase right now. So,
and without giving anything away, what kind of games are they? Are they like resource gathering type games, or are they like card games, or what kind of games are you guys working on?
So one is a card game, and we're keeping it really simple, and ideally that would be the first one if we going through Kickstarter that we would launch. Sure. So that we can learn on that one. And then we have our bigger game that's up to 6 players. For right now, it plays up to an hour, but we're trying to knock that down. I'd be happier at 30 to 45 minutes, but we'll
zone.
See.
That's my zone. That's my tribe. I love it. Anything less than an hour. Well, I know you got little kids, right? So it's sometimes carving out time to play a game. There's a lot of great games out there that take a long time to play, but certainly where I'm in my stage of life is I like to play shorter games just when I can carve off some time. So that's very cool. Definitely. Well, you certainly, I'm sure, have got a following now behind you with some of the work you've done again on the Dark series and with Queen Bee. Hopefully you can leverage that to take it hopefully leverage it to the next level. And I just want to wish you and your family all the best. Anybody, if they want to contact you, so how would somebody reach out to you if they're interested in your artwork and maybe putting it on some of the games that they're working on?
Yeah, you can message me on Instagram, Facebook, or my email at sarahmkeele@gmail.com. And I will respond to any of those places. And yeah.
Or feel free when you're in the Board Game Binge Facebook group to DM you as well, right?
Yes, definitely.
Well, Sarah, thank you again so much for coming on the podcast. This always goes so fast. All the best to you and your family, and take care.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Cheers.